Today, we're answering some of the juicy questions about automatic transmissions, oil coolers in particular, right? Do you need an oil cooler on your vehicle? How hot is too hot? What's the range? Can you run an automatic transmission too cool? And we have so many other questions as to why you need them. Do you need them at all? All the different things. Every vehicle is vastly different. So we'll go through a few. We'll show you around. This is actually our area up here at Wholesale Automatics that we actually build all the assemblies with. I'm joined today by Jeremy.
Hey, Arm.
Hey, he's one of my favourites here. He's so good. He's one of my best workers here. I even tried to give him a pay rise last week and he refused. How's that? Jeremy's sitting here going, what? I didn't know about that. What happened there? Anyway, up here, this is actually where we do all the assembly for the oil coolers. At the moment, I think Jeremy's doing, these are all the Ford Ranger PX, and these are the twin mounts. So we actually do two of these for each vehicle and that. So I'll run you around. So this is actually the assembly area. We have all the hose, the cartons, all the conduits, all the different coolers that we have. They're all Australian made. The whole lot are all Australian made. Our cores are made by PWR in Queensland. All of the steel mounts that you see are actually all made here in Victoria. And you do it right. One, never use a stainless steel mount, because rule is, look it up, you shouldn't use stainless steel bolted to a steel car with an aluminium cool on it, because it actually induces corrosion, mild corrosion on the aluminium itself. So we use a mild steel mount. We actually zinc plate them before we actually manx coat them. And these manx coat them, they are tough. They are a super tough, durable. I'm trying to find something to scratch it with. Look. Look at that. Not a thing. Absolutely perfect. All right. It's such a thing. So it's perfect for really half in environments, salt water spray, especially if you're doing a lot of beach work and stuff like that. So let's run you through. So this is the assembly area. We'll run around the other side. I'll join with Craig. As we come down, this is actually all the different makes and models we have. We have all the Amarok stuff. And in amongst all the Amarok, we actually make all the special clamps that we need to do, to actually mount them on. We make all the different cooler fittings, and every model has its own version of cooler fitting, and that's how we do it. So that's actually the Amarok one. Ford Rangers, Everest, they all have their own style and that. So we got it for the Mazda BT50 and the D-Max. So this is the mount that we use, which we use for the the D-Max, the new BT50, MUX. What do we got? We got Everest, early Everest, we got late Everest, we got 200 series, Jeep Parado 120, 150, we got the 300 series, new 300 series, and here we've even got the new mount for the, if I can get one out, this is for the new, the next gen. So this is the, which way I hold it up, there you go, the next gen Ford Ranger. Same thing with that. We have to make all the special pipes and fittings and everything we need to go through the whole lot. So this is where we keep some of the stock. Jeremy has a lot of it on the other side. Around here, we've got two more pallet loads that have come in. Now we actually get about two of these pallet loads, what, once a day, Jeremy? Once every second day? It's pretty close. And then around here is where we normally keep the stock. At the moment, we've been wiped out. And Jeremy's frantically trying to do it. We normally keep about 300 or 400 in stock at any time. So this is where the stock is. We're up on the mezzanine here, so we keep them up out of the workshop. So we've got the whole workshop area down there. You can see it. The old 79 series, she hasn't been hidden away. She's down there as well. And let's get into answering some of the all-important questions about oil coolers. So now, one of the first questions is do I actually need an oil cooler? If you ask any transmission shop around Australia, do I need an oil cooler? They're going to turn around and say yes. But why? Why are they all insistent on oil coolers? Isn't the original one sufficient? And everybody says, oh, it gets hot. And I never get, and so many comments I see online, I go, well, my car never gets hot. I've driven around, I've done 100,000 Ks, and I haven't got an oil cooler on, and I haven't had a problem. But how do you know? Inside the car, inside the auto, you got all these rubber seals, all right? They're full of these rubber seals, all right? And heat affects rubber horribly. And what it is, it's the cycle. from when it's cold in the morning to how hot it gets, and the cycle backwards and forwards, right? The bigger the difference between how cold it is in the morning to how hot it got, right, and back again, and if that distance is high, so if your auto is running really, really high, especially the Ford Rangers that are always over 90 degrees plus, right, you will find that difference is far greater than, say, a Prado or a 120 Prado or something, or a 200 series, that it's not quite as great. So you'll find that the rubber seals on a Ford Ranger will go hard and brittle much faster, right? And you can actually get to the point you can actually snap a seal. They get that hard. So you might not see that your car's physically overheating, but it doesn't mean that the seals aren't going hard, right? We always have a joke here, and that is, never buy a car that hasn't had an oil cooler fitted previously, because you're going to be dealing with hard seals soon enough, all right? That's the reason as to why. It's not just all about preventative maintenance and making sure that you don't get stuck out in the middle of nowhere with oil pouring out of one of the seals because it's gotten so hot it's hydraulically pushed the front pump seal out. It is all about longevity, and also your oil just simply lasts a lot longer if you turn around and keep it cool, right? How many cars, we did an episode not long ago, we're running around underneath all the cars, do you service your vehicle? And every single one we looked at, the oil was burnt. Right? And it wasn't just for the fact that it hadn't been serviced in some time. It's also the fact that every car that we looked at didn't have an auxiliary oil cooler on it. So that made a big difference. So we'll go through a few other things, right? Now, I've got a couple of kits here. This is actually the Nissan Y62. We built it with a twin cooler. So there's actually one on either side of the same mount. It's actually sandwiched in between, right? We don't take the original cooler out. Now, the Y62 has this big stonking great cooler. Let me get it the right way up. There it is. It has a stonking great cooler already. It doesn't run through the radiator whatsoever. It doesn't run through a water. And I was noticing one of my fellow YouTube people that actually turn around, and John was doing a big comparo on what's more efficient, water or air. And yeah, he turned around and in the end he said, well, water was more efficient. And he did a good job, and he was absolutely correct in what he was saying. However, it did leave me with a couple of questions, and one is that, well, when we talk about water being efficient, in the case of the Ford Ranger, this is what you typically have as an oil cooler. It's actually a heat exchange unit. Bolts on the side of the auto, they plug into the transmission directly, and you just bring in hot water from the radiator into here. So therefore you're using warm or hot water to cool your transmission. So it does have a limited effect, but they use water only, nothing else but water. So when John turned around and says, oh, well, water's more efficient, but is it more efficient than a small cooler? One of these coolers? So it's more efficient than running a single auxiliary cooler? Is it more efficient than running a big dual system like this, or what? And in some companies, you'll notice, as in Nissan, they don't run water at all, because they run a pretty big cooler like this. They do run a thermostat in here, and they can get stuck. And I've actually got two here. If you look at these two, these are both Nissan Y62 thermostats. I'll get Craig to do a close-up soon on them. But you'll notice that these, see the pins out on that and the pins in on that one. We see this a lot with not only the Y62, but a couple of others where they fail. Just like a thermostat in a car can fail. They fail. And what it actually does, or it's actually in this case, they jam the cooler close, which means the cooler is in full-time bypass. You're not getting any cooler. We also see it a lot after rebuilds that valve tends to get jammed in a position, and normally it's the opposition. So you can't even flush the lines through or anything because it just bypasses the cooler. That's why when we do an overhaul on one of these, you always turn around and put a new cooler in. And we do actually have a fix for that. This is actually one of the new thermal valves that we're getting ready to release soon. That actually goes in. This has actually had the top cut off, so we can actually see what we were designing. And what it does, it removes that. So this is actually going to be one of the new thermal bypass valves for the Y62 cooler kit. And what else have I got here? So I've gone through that. And actually, it's funny enough that the Nissan also runs this little thing, and you think, oh, this looks a lot like a heat exchange like this. They're the opposite of each other. This is actually an oil warmer, is where this is an oil cooler. So the Nissan, because they do use them in a lot of European countries, they do turn around and they run engine oil through the big things. I'll actually cut these off. I've actually cut it open completely so you can see what they actually look like on the inside. So whenever we do anything, we're always cutting things open and having a look. When we did this, we cut the top of where the thermostat goes into here on the Y62, and we're actually making sure that we learn exactly how every single vehicle works, how they intended it to work, because no good improving on something that doesn't need improving on. All right, we got the same with the Amarok. Now the Amarok is exactly the same. It doesn't use water at all to run its oil cooler, and because of the limited room, our Amarok cooler it's a single cooler. And the reason being is that we can still use the Amarok cooler just like we do with the Y62. The Amarok one's actually a little bit smaller than this one, but it's much the same. Doesn't run it through water. So this is the Amarok one. And likewise with the Amarok one, we actually have, this is a parts bag, but we actually have the thermal bypass valve that we put through for them, which basically just runs the cooler all the time. Not only the original cooler, but it also runs the Amarok cooler. As with the Y62, we were doing a little bit different. We used to leave the thermal valve in them all the time, which our coolers, these become the primary coolers on a Nissan, and then it goes through, and if the cooler is actually turned off because the thermal thing, still getting cooled because of all this, if it gets really, really hot, then the thermal valve comes on, and the original cooler becomes the bypass on it. All of our coolers come with fitting instructions, makes it easy, all the different makes and models. So let's get into more of the questions, right? We get asked a lot of questions all the time about coolers, right? We've answered, do you need them? Every single automatic transmission lasts a lot longer if you have an oil cooler in it. That is just plain to see, all right? Some cars do suffer from overheating, just when people put towing on them, and I don't know whether the manufacturers, they're not fibbing to you when they say, oh, you could tow with 3.5 tons or 3 tons, and you get customers ringing up all the time and they're struggling, they're overheating non-stop and that. And we even get 300 series, 200 series, they all overheat under certain circumstances, right? But what's our most popular cooler, you reckon, Jeremy?
Probably the Ranger.
The Ford Ranger?
Ford Ranger,
right?
The most popular.
By far. Then what? What's the next one?
Next one would be probably Colorado's.
Colorado.
Then D-Max.
And then the D-Max. And they tend to be, a lot of those people are also ones that they do a lot of towing and touring with these vehicles and that. The Y62 guys are a little bit different. We do get a lot of sales, but it tends to be the ones when they've actually had something go wrong, then they'll give us a buzz. And then obviously the new Ford Ranger, the next gen Ranger is much the same. We're starting to develop, or we've actually completed developing those. They're available now and everything, and we're going out the door with them. Next question. Can I run my transmission too cool? No, you can't. How many times I see people say, oh, you can't run it, you run it too cool. What is too cool, right? You start off in the morning, like I took off this morning at my house and that, and it was what, 3 degrees, right? Other people, like, especially if you're in areas like Canberra in the dead of the winter and that, -5, they run fine, right? The torque converter generates a lot of heat, just taking off. It's already slipping, it's already generating heat. It's putting the heat directly into the transmission, right? Especially if you're in stop, start traffic, bumper to bumper, hills, mountains and everything, where your torque converter isn't locked up all the time. You'll find that they generate a massive amount of heat, you don't have any problems. The coolest you can ever get a transmission to run, believe it or not, is on the open road. When you're cruising along, you're doing it easy, and your lockup is on, and you'll find that the coolers will bring the temperature down. I think the least I've ever seen is about 45, 50 on a long distance. Is that too cold? No, it's not. Not at all, right? If you were in Alaska or any of those other countries that really get into the sub -20s and -30s and -40s and all that, then, well, even then, most of those customers preheat their entire car before they take off. Then they tend to suffocate the radiator and everything else like that to try and bring their temperatures up. But in Australia and New Zealand, I just, my opinion, and with everything that I see, seals run longer. A car that runs around with a lower temperature, the rubber seals are going to last a lot longer, right? So it does get down. Can you rely on the lockup to keep your temperatures down all the time? No. So many people out there go, put a lockup in, that'll solve your problem. No, it won't. It's not possible it can't, right? It will solve it when you're on the open roads. You cannot use lockup in every circumstance, like in soft sand, windy, stop-start traffic, going through the city, mountainous sort of areas. Any of those, you're either going too slow to be able to use lockup, or in a case of soft sand, you're probably putting too much strain on the lockup and you're liable to, the lockup plate's actually liable to slip. Therefore, your fallback is your cooler. You need your cooler all the time, all right? And lockups aren't available for all models. So for me, lockup and a cooler is a must-have on any vehicle, right? Even a way of measuring your temperature so you actually know what your car doesn't like. After a while, with the temperature gauge, you'll know what she doesn't actually like. And you'll learn it. You'll learn it so much that you'll get to a hill, you almost predict, oh, I shall get to about 70 or 80 degrees going up this hill, and you'll watch it. But you'll learn it so well that one day, when something's not right, you'll look at that and you'll go, something's not right. I shouldn't be at that temperature, right? And that's one thing, at temperature. It doesn't tell you what temperature you're at. It actually teaches you what your auto doesn't like. You'll get used to it. You'll know what's right, what's wrong. And also, you'll know if you're trying to change something to stop it from getting hot, whether you're succeeding and not going the other way. Scan gauges do a great job, right? I like temperature gauge personally because they're in your face. They're right in front of you at a quick glance. They're very, very quick to tell you what it is, right? So from there, what else have we got? What's the normal running temperature of an automatic transmission, right? Well, that varies greatly, right? When you start up in the morning, obviously they're 10, 20 degrees or less if you're in colder climates. We like to see them run somewhere between the 50 and 70 mark as much as we possibly can, all right? Obviously, and that's why we build the coolers, to try and achieve that as much as we possibly can. 80 to 90 is still okay, but it's like, well, why is it at 90? Are you running a little bit slower? Are you in bumper to bumper traffic or whatever? On a warmer day, you're starting to tow now. You're coming up through any of the mountains. Let me do an example. You're coming up through the Toowoomba Range, the Adelaide Hills, the Black Spur here in Victoria, up the Cairns Range. I don't know what it's called in Cairns Range. And I'm sure there's many hundreds more around Australia. With a big set of coolers on and that, you should be able to keep it under 100. Without coolers, I've seen so many cars, 120, 130, 140, right? So at 110, start looking at what's going on, very much, right? Am I near the top of the hill? Which case it's like, okay, I'm at the top, it's gonna get easier from here, the temperature will come down, right? If you're at 110 and you're only quarter of the way up and she's heading for 120 or 130 degrees, the best thing you can do is drop it down a gear, bring the engine revs up. A lot of people think lowering the RPM keeps the cooler. It's not. It's the other way around, right? Higher RPM, right, takes load off of the torque converter, takes load off of the transmission. The engine revs up a little bit. The torque converter gets a little bit more centrifugal force with it, which helps it. It actually does help it. And also with a higher RPM, it does help with the flow a little bit more, all right? So if you are in a position where you're struggling with temperature, sometimes higher RPM, down a gear, you know, and off you go. But the foolproof way, put a cooler on it. Not just from the point of view of, I only want to put one on if I'm overheating. It's preventative maintenance. It makes your oil last twice as long, right? It stops rubber seals from going hard, so therefore it makes your transmission last a hell of a lot longer. And look, and they're cheap. You know, not as like we're asking to go out there and buy, you know, an upgraded cylinder head for the engine. Put a cooler on them. Most of them are around the $500 to $700 mark. They come with great DIY instructions. We got 50 mechanics around the place. Any mechanic shop can fit them all over Australia and that. So they're pretty easy. Jeromee's been busy here working away. feverishly, eh? How many kits you reckon you build a week?
Hundreds.
Hundreds?
Hundreds per week.
You do that many?
Do that many,
Right.
yes.
And poor bugger, he's got to sit there. As part of our list, we have thousands of individual parts that goes into all of these kits. So Jeromee's involved with all of the procurement, making sure that we have stock of it. We got this mezzanine. We didn't even mention the other mezzanine that has pallet loads of coolers. All the hoses got to come in, all the conduit, because all of our kits, we don't just put normal hose on it. We also encase them in conduit. Therefore, stone strikes, everything. We've thought of the lot. Have a good think about it. If you're not sure, give your local transmission shop a call. This is not about us selling you something. You can go anywhere and buy an oil cooler. I'm not bothered by that. This is all about letting you know some of the facts, right? There is no such thing as too cool in Australia. I don't like to see anybody run their temperatures over 110 or 120, right? And if you're at 120, start thinking about where you're going to pull over, right? If you're 100 and you're there at 90 degrees and more often, you really do need to start thinking about a cooler, because these rubber seals are getting really hard really fast, right? Have a good think about it, talk. Otherwise, give us a call if you've got any questions. Jump online. They're all online. We got about 40, 50 different makes and models of coolers now. And please, in the comments below, let us know, right? Have you fitted an oil cooler? What differences did you find? Was it a successful upgrade, right? Would you recommend it to friends, right? Let us know. Or the other way, I'm not up for an oil cooler. We like to hear both. We like to hear the stories from both, very much so. So please jump in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts on the oil coolers. And if you've got any questions, please put them in the comments below. We'll go through anybody that asks a question in the comments. We will always answer them, all right? And please, most importantly, from me and Jeromee here at Wholesale Automatics, like, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Good on you, mate. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Good on you.
I wanna be the best in the game, invest in my name. Check no restraints, I'm obsessed with the pain. I ingest, I retain, assess and I change. Possessed by the thought I'll be free one day from society.